What's up, friends? Welcome back to our New Year's Day edition of Radical Health Radio. Welcome to 2025. Today, I talk to Dane Sanders, who's a coach, a guide, director of human development, and founder, head coach at MWOD, which stands for Men and Women of Discomfort. So we have a conversation all about that, why discomfort is the key to your success. We dive into who Dane is, his story, overcoming some of his struggles, like losing his father at just 3 years old. And then we talk all about how to really own your 2025. So goal setting, the what, the why, the how to build habits, what your relationship with failure should be like, because you're going to fail sometimes. Why starting small is the key to going big, and what to do when you don't feel motivated, and so much more. This is a really fun conversation. I love these kinds of chats, and I know you're going to get a lot out of it and feel very motivated to have your biggest, best year yet. So without further ado, let's get into it with Dane Sanders. Dane Sanders, welcome to the show, my friend. As we are throwing this one out into the world, it is 2025. So for the loyalists that are joining us on New Year's Day, I hope you're ready to buckle up, because we've got a good conversation all around how to actually capture this energy and make 2025 your happiest, healthiest, most successful, insert whatever you're hoping to accomplish this year. And Dane is the man to help me have that conversation. I met Dane probably a couple of months ago now, and we speak a lot of the same language, and I know this is going to be juicy and fruitful, so that's what we're going to dive into. But before we do, Dane, just floor is yours. Who's Dane Sanders? What do you do these days? And what are we going to get into today? Give us a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, there's probably two things that are relevant to your audience that I spend my time doing. But before I even get to that, I just want to say thanks for having me on. Just really respect you and how you do life. For those who are listening, if you're ever curious, is Steve the real deal or not? He is indeed. I've seen him early in the morning. I've seen him midday. I've seen him end his days, and the dude abides. So grateful to be on this conversation. The two things that I spend most of my energy on is one is a project called Men and Women of Discomfort. We have come to believe that voluntary discomfort is this remarkable force of nature. When I choose the hard thing, it reverses tyranny in this world, personally and well beyond that socially. And we'll get into that conversation later. But the way that community works is people all over the place literally make the decision to not make decisions. They opt in. That's their one decision. And then all their choices are made for them comprehensively for 12 weeks. That's their first round. And then as they stay with the community, they ratchet up their agency and find that if they can keep on the hunt for the uncomfortable thing and to choose it, they gain a remarkable strength and awareness that is uncommon and gets them closer to what they're often looking for. The second thing I do, which is why you and I met, is our very first member of Men and Women of Discomfort was a dear friend of mine, a guy named Taylor Holiday, who runs this incredible company called Common Thread Collective. Of course, Common Thread is an agency that supports and partners with Heart and Soil, which you and I are both associated with. And I had the chance to share a little bit of how I've taken Men and Women of Discomfort ideas and imported them into this context where I serve as Vice President of Employee Development and Performance at CTC. So the reason Taylor hired me, I wasn't out looking for a gig, but he hired me as a consultant to work with some key employees. We had some pretty remarkable experiences over several years. And he finally just said, I need to fire you as a consultant and hire you as a vice president. And I said, well, hold on. I'm kind of into this thing over here. I'm not giving up MWOD. And he said, the only reason you're getting a job is because of what you're doing in MWOD. We need to figure out how could our employees actually choose the hard thing. And the bet was that if they did, we would become what we aspired to. And that has certainly happened.
Heck yeah, man. Where did this all begin for you? Something I've learned speaking to people that do similar kind of work is sometimes there was a little bit of a breakdown that led to a breakthrough, some kind of crisis. You mentioned purposefully choosing chaos, purposefully choosing the uncomfortable thing, because when it finds you in life, I'm guessing that readies you for it. What's your personal backstory? How'd you get into this line of work?
A lifetime of utter failure and disappointment. Uh, uh, but well, I will give a little more detail on that. So when I was 3 years old, my dad died in a car accident suddenly, and what I found out later in life um, was not only did my dad die when I was 3, but my dad's dad died when my dad was 3.
Wow.
And somehow there was this crazy narrative that I had internalized as a little kid, a little like toddler, for goodness sakes, that somehow, and I won't get into the whole story in this, but somehow I was somehow complicit in my father leaving. Like, so basically what happened was the night before he died, um, I was running around with my brothers. We're having a good time at this Sunday potluck. And of course, we were kids running about like kids do. And my dad said, boys, if you're not in bed in like now, uh, there'll be trouble. And we kept running around, having a good time, annoying my parents' guests. And we heard the creak of the floorboards. And I ran to bed. My brother, who I was running around with, ran into my dad. He got the belt. I was giggling under the covers, thinking I had gotten away scot free. And then the next day, he in a snowstorm died tragically. And that experience, as crazy as it might sound, because it wasn't rational, somehow I had internalized that there will be trouble if we didn't go to bed on time. Was this?
Mm,
And deep in my guts, I thought, if I don't figure out how to do things just right, just perfect, just order my life in such a way. Order became this like idol in my
mm,
world. And I totally was naive to the reality that more of our world is chaotic than ordered. And I just didn't want to acknowledge that. So I would push against it all the time, take the easy path, look for shortcuts, navigated a lot of my life that way. And then in my 40s, I found myself in, like a lot of people do, in an existential crisis. Walking around with a buddy of mine named Tim Kruger. We would like work out in the Y at the YCM or YMCA at like 5 in the morning and go for these walks around Back Bay in Newport Beach, California. And we were just in a malaise. Like, what are we doing? We had wonderful spouses, and we had kids. He was about 10 years younger than me, but both of us were just in this existential haze. And to wake us up, we just started doing knucklehead, wacky
mm.
things. Like before we knew who Wim Hof was, we were holding our breath and jumping in cold water. We were doing ridiculous internet guru workouts that didn't necessarily make sense, but they made us really uncomfortable. And over time, we just started to realize like there's something that felt really good. If we could have our worst experience by choice when we first woke up in the day, other things that were happening to us didn't feel nearly
Mm.
as grave. And fast forward, I met Taylor and several others, and they wanted to jump in, and we were like, oh, let's invent this crazy idea called Men and Women of Discomfort. And but then Tim got cancer, and uh, he fought it for about a year and a half. He ended up dying in January of 22. And that experience of watching his body betray himself, have this involuntary discomfort, just crush him. But yet he was not crushed.
Mm.
He was the most strong I'd ever seen him. The way he was showing up for his wife and his kids, the legacy he left, it was just remarkable. And then I realized that there was really something to what we were in the midst of, and I needed to codify that. And as I did, that structure, as finding language and frameworks to talk about things, I found a whole world like you of people who had gotten to this kind of reality before me. And uh, as I found language for it for our community, the community now could talk about it in a way that it spread, and people didn't just have a transformative experience. They could talk about, well, what was going into it. And turns out there's a lot of great, well validated research on things like self determination theory and neuroscientifically things like the anterior midcingulate cortex. When you choose a hard thing, what grows in our brains as a result, and on and on. But that's what's led to this becoming what I believe is my life's work, both personally. It's like this lifeline for mental health and for physical health. And what I've also discovered is it's highly transferable.
Mm.
It serves, this is the human condition that people are up
Mm.
against. And uh, the more I understand it, it's constantly surprising to me. It's not like you discover it and you're done. I can't plumb the depths of how voluntary discomfort is this unlock for life.
Right. Right. What do you think, MWOD, choosing the voluntary discomfort, doing the hard thing, what do you think it's railing against in the modern world? Why is it so impactful?
Mm. That is entirely the right question. In my experience, there's three things that are very particular that are worth emphasizing. And the metaphor that I like to think about is if you picture and I'll get to the specifics beyond the metaphor in a moment, but if you look at the ocean, like I live on the coast, and anyone who's ever been to an ocean knows that there are a reality going on underneath the surface and a reality going on above the surface. Underneath the surface, there are currents. There, you get in at Pier 14 in Newport Beach, you're going to be at Pier 32 before you blink if you don't pay attention. And what you're not paying attention to is this drift, and that's what I like to call it. That's taking us places we don't choose. This is the involuntary discomforts of our lives, the circumstances. You go to work and um, you get a cup of coffee, and the coffee's hot, but in 10 minutes the coffee's cold. It drifts. The second law of thermodynamics, entropy. Even the fact that we age, that our body, if you don't put hard weight on bone and muscle, your bone density is decreasing, not increasing. Right. Things fall apart. These are just natural things that I would encompass in this metaphor of the drift that's always happening, and people radically underestimate it. They always think they have more time. They think that they'll just get better. This dream I have, it'll happen in the future. It's not how it actually works. So the drift is the first issue. The second is what happens above the waterline, which I call the whirlwind of being human. These are the storms that come our way that we don't anticipate. The bad news at work. He or she says no. The doctor tells you something you don't want to hear. You play pickleball and you tear your Achilles heel. Whatever the thing is, you didn't plan it. It happened to you. It's what happened to Tim. And that storm that happens above the waterline in combination with the drift that happens below the waterline, they're pulling us in ways that are incredibly uncomfortable. And they're distinct, but it's just part of reality. They're not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just a chaotic reality that if you don't acknowledge is true, you really are playing from a deficit. This is what Nassim Taleb talks about in things like Fooled by Randomness and so on. So with these realities going on all the time, these very predictable black swans that are coming our way all the time, in our culture in this moment, in a terrorizing way, our entire economy is built around comfort. And this is well documented. I think, who do I think of most? Michael Easter wrote a book called The Comfort Crisis, which I think is a really resourceful book in this category. And the notion is simply this, that can you imagine any product or service you or I have purchased in the last 20 years that didn't promise easier, quick, convenient, cheap, fast? Why have 8-minute abs when you can have 4-minute abs on a pill? Like it doesn't, it's this incredible subversive idol in our culture that is worshipped. In fact, you hear it in our language all the time. People will make a request and they'll say, if this makes you comfortable, or like, I don't want you to make, are you okay with this? All the way to, again, every marketing message that is in play right now. And I think when people experience the drift and they experience the whirlwind and that cultural dynamic goes on, there's a sense of entitlement to, oh, life is hard. I deserve comfort. And that's the insidious nature of the thing. And as they choose it, the way it practically plays out is like disease. It's like obesity. It's addiction. And it plays out over and over and over again. And if people don't learn how to swim against the current of the drift, or they don't learn to stand up in the storm, or they don't learn to choose the uncomfortable thing instead of just going with what's comfortable, what they will get is what most get.
Right.
Standard American diet leads to where it leads. The lack of movement leads to a sedentary lifestyle, which leads to premature suffering, extraordinary suffering, and death, and then generational, because this is then handed on as a set of values down through to our kids and kids' kids.
That's right.
So those are a couple thoughts of what I think the cause is in this moment.
Yeah, it's stuff I think about all the time, and I think you hit the nail on the head with how insidious it is for people just because it is comfortably numb. It's bad. And in a strange way, you're familiar with the region beta paradox. It's basically this idea that you'd be better off if your situation was worse.
Yes.
Because right now you're in this zone of comfortable complacency where it's not great, but it's not bad enough to spur you into change until it is.
Mm.
And when it is, it's something like the cancer diagnosis, it's something like a midlife crisis, a divorce. So it's an interesting thought experiment to play with. What if I'd be better off if it was worse? Because it's going to force me into action now to not settle for there, but to go for your win or do the thing that's a little bit more impactful. Because otherwise, yeah, I mean, that comfortable, numb existence isn't really what people want, is it? And I mean, you've worked with hundreds of
Mm.
people at this point, maybe more than that. They
Mm.
they want to live for more, but it's hard to do the hard thing, I guess, which is why there's that paradox: easy choices, hard life; harder
Mm.
choices, easy life. How
That's
do
right.
you get people to play bigger? How do you invoke this thing in them to go for the win, to do the scary but exciting thing when the comfort is so comfortable?
Literally last night, I was hanging out with a dear friend of mine. I've known him since college. His name is Brady, and he's a member of our community now. And we're entering into week 11 of his first round. So it's 12 weeks. He's in week 11. He's lost 30 or 40 pounds. He's done this in the midst of, by the way, injury, illness, very complicated on the road lifestyle of business. But he's kind of waved the white flag of surrender to go, look,
Mm,
for these 12 weeks, no matter what, I'm going to do the thing. It's not going to kill me. I can do this. And of course, he's getting all these benefits from it. And this is a friend, again, I've known him forever, and familiarity can breed contempt sometimes. Most of my friends make fun of me for this way that I live.
mm,
They don't make fun of the results. They actually affirm the results. They, but they, uh, like they'll affirm that I'm in shape and that I can do things that others my age can't do. Yet they kind of make fun of the process by which that happens. So when they come
mhm.
up, they'll if I haven't seen them in a while, they'll say things like, "Oh, are you still doing that discomfort thing? I'm a man of comfort," as if that's funny or novel. And you know, if I had a nickel for every time I've heard kind of a version of that, I get it, I really do, and I love these people. So don't mishear me. I'm not kind of putting them in the, but Brady was one of them. And here he
Right.
is late, you know, years later, after putting up with me all this time, he just kind of, he got sick and tired of being sick and tired and said, look, I'll try it, man. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars in other ways. I'll try
Mhm.
this little thing that's going to cost me a fraction, but there's no way this is going to deliver. And last night he's like near tears telling me like, I probably got another decade of my life. And we're so close friends. He's like associating with me. And I'm like, Brady, this has nothing to do with me. It has to do with you. You woke up. And I think your question is so critical because I think just most people are sleeping. They just
Yeah.
they're not attending to things. And it's funny, even the idea of like doing getting into a cold shower or holding your breath, like there's a sense in which if you really hate cold showers and you get into one and the first thing you do in the morning or cold plunge or whatever you're doing, sure, there might be physiological benefits and stuff, but mostly what it does is it wakes you up.
Right.
Mostly there's nothing else going on. You're trying to
Right.
breathe because your body thinks it's dying, and it's not. It's safe. It's fine. But these little wake up calls, you start stacking those, and all of a sudden people start coming to. They start tuning in to like, there's more going on here. And so I would argue that the first part is to wake up. Anthony DeMello likes to say most,
Mm.
and this is a bit of a butchering of it, but like most people are born in their sleep, they grow up in their sleep, they get married in their sleep, they have babies in their sleep, and then they die in their
Yep.
sleep. And this idea of sleepwalking, if even as I'm hearing these, as I'm saying these words, and I know you've said these before, and most of your listeners are awake, there's somebody who's listening and they're waking up literally as we're talking. They're like, there's
Yes.
something wrong right now. And I just want to affirm, if you have that feeling of there's something off, I do feel numb. I do feel like I'm working diligently in one category, but other categories are betraying that one
Mm.
category, or whatever else is showing up. Pay attention to the discord that you're experiencing, because that can be the start, the spark at least. To get to the kindling, to light the fire, does require some kind of series of habits that
Mm-hmm.
can stack into maybe a routine, and eventually the routine can actually turn into a life practice. And once you don't get to the life practice on day one, but you get, this is where James Clear is so resourceful. Like you start with a little bit, get a little traction, and then you start parlaying that into something that you can control, a routine. But just know that routines are brittle. They'll break when life gets complicated, when the storms hit. So eventually you need to get to a place where, like, no matter what's going on in the day, your practice is an immovable object in your life. But that's not a today problem for folks who are waking up. Today, it's like, just get
Right.
started. And then,
Yeah.
and as you stick with it, you'll be amazed at the ground you can take.
I love that you mentioned Anthony DeMello. His audiobook, Awareness, is one of my favorites. I listen
Me
to it
too.
regularly. And it's another DeMelloism where he says the chances of you waking up are directly proportional to the amount of truth you can
Mm,
take
mm,
without turning away.
mm,
Because I think when you're in the process of waking up, you have to face some of those uncomfortable truths. And that's that little feeling you're talking about. It's this, whether that's the wise self or it's your intuition or it's a gut feeling or it's just something is gnawing at you to wake up. But know that waking up in a world that's tried to keep you sleepwalking from pretty much the day you were born is
mm,
not an easy task.
mm,
And that's why, like you said to your friends, they kind of respect the results, but they, everybody wants the view, nobody wants the climb.
mm,
Because I think we all realize that it's going to take a lot to wake up. Are you willing to face that truth?
mm.
Now, I'm curious about trying to get to the grist of what is that truth that some people are wading through. Is it like uninvestigated stories, like the story you had about your father from way back, that it seems like with enough time you've been able to look back and say, oh, I was living by that story and I only figured it out at X amount of time? Is it, what have you come across? I know everybody's different, but what are some of the big uncomfortable truths that people need to understand and face about themselves in order to actually be successful on a change endeavor like this?
I love that question, man. I what occurs to me when you say it, especially because everyone's narrative is particular to them, is that is that, and it relates to what you said about truth. I had a mentor once suggest that if we actually could see truth in its reality, its full reality, it would be too heavy. It would crush us. It's just too much. And there's a sense in which some people have harder truths to face than others.
Right.
Um, and I respect that. There's a sense in which I can't overstate my privilege, my
Right.
my vantage point. I just I feel fortunate, and I say that having lost a dad at 3, and other really
Right.
traumatic and dramatic things happen in my life. I know it's nothing compared to others. So I really, I just want to say up front, I respect the fact that some people have it much harder than others, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
And in saying that, there needs to be, either from outside or from within, like inside our guts. And when I say outside, like I would credit it actually to a deity, to God actually intervening
Mm.
in my life
Hmm.
to wake me up a little. But it was insufficient on its own. I think if there is a God, God's speaking to everybody, and not everybody's tuning in. So it
Right.
could be, there needs to be some interest and willingness to participate with reality. And I think that a lot of us struggle to do that. There's
Yeah.
and they're they're smarter people than me that have a lot of insight around spiritually, psychologically, as to why there's so much resistance.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm interested in is, regardless of what an individual is resisting, there's a sense in which that resistance itself is a tool. It's a vehicle.
Hmm.
Because my experience is people who just acknowledge, like, I don't want to do that thing that I know is going to be good for me. Just pay attention to that. Because if you and just ask, like, I wonder why. It is good for me. And these other things I choose are not good for me. I have enough
Right.
experience in life to see the distinction. Just sit in that for a minute. And what I have found is, most people who sit in it for not very long, it doesn't take a long time. It starts illuminating, self-illuminating. They start to see, like,
Hmm.
oh, there's something here for me, that if only I would have just a little more courage to sit in it, what might I discover? Will you tell me, like, does any of that resonate in your experience?
A lot, yeah, and used a few key words, I think, like courage. I
Mm,
think that that's big. It's not this, going after big things and changing yourself is not about being fearless. I think that's
mm,
a mistake people make sometimes. Oh, I'm too scared. Well, courage is the act of feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I do think you need a little bit of courage to even sit with yourself quietly sometimes requires
yeah,
courage. Again,
yeah.
you might be 45 years old listening to this and you've never sat outside and put 10 minutes on and sat with yourself and just thought about struggles and thought about why you sabotage the way you do. That's going to require some courage. And
Mm,
there's a lot of axioms that cut through a lot of this noise that speak like what you resist persists.
mm,
And that energy of resistance, if you keep resisting it, it persists. And
mm,
thoughts become things. And there's a lot of this surrender experiment that's required to go into the thing. I've said this on the show a bunch of times, and people will know it by now. But my favorite quote is Joseph Campbell's: "The cave you fear to enter has the treasure you seek most."
mm,
Like it's that big scary thing that is guarded by the proverbial dragon that you don't want
mm,
to face and you don't want to look at, that has the treasure that you want. It's the treasure chest full of the gold, full of the wisdom that is not just selfishly for you, it's to bring back to your tribes, to your families and your communities. And I think it's really important to want to go that. And one of the point that I do want to make, because I really want to acknowledge that you said this, I think it's very important, this acknowledgement that some people have had it so rough, it's unbelievable.
mm.
And that it's still up to them to
That's
do
right.
something about that.
That's right.
It's that not everything that happened to you was your fault, but it is your responsibility now. You
Mm,
can be defined by that forever. You can play victim to that forever. And I get it. Like
mm,
that must be so hard to hear some of the things. And sometimes I say like, oh, could I even get over that?
mm,
But at the same time, you kind of have no choice. You're either going to be buried by it or you're going to get above it if you
mm,
are willing to do the thing. And it's only you that can do it, really. So it's a beautiful burden in a sense. I wouldn't
mm,
wish it on anybody, but it's yours at the end of the
mm,
day. It's your hand, and maybe it's not about the hand that you've been played, the hand you've been dealt, rather, but how you play it.
mm. It's interesting you say that. I'm reminded of a story about a guy named Dan Allender. Dan is a famous therapist in the Pacific Northwest, um, and his expertise is around working with adults who were sexually molested when they were kids, as he was in his own experience. And through his training and work, he has become um, remarkably gifted in his capacity to help people transcend those horrific experiences. And nobody, what's interesting, your comment about victim is interesting to me because anyone who's been sexually molested as a kid, nobody would say they aren't victims, right? Victim isn't
Right.
isn't like the scarlet letter here. This is not this is it happened, and you're not
Yeah.
responsible. It happened to you. It's an involuntary discomfort. But what's interesting to me about Dan Allender, as I understand his work, is he has one goal and one rule when he takes on a client. And the one, I did my little peace
Nice
sign,
balloons.
so I don't know if that'll pop up or not in the future on the recording. But for those who are listening, I made a peace sign in their video talk, and these balloons popped up virtually. So augmented realities everywhere. So, but he has one goal and he has one rule. And I'll talk about the rule first. The rule is he will only work with a client for 1 year max. And I'll tell you why in a second. His goal is to invite these legitimate victims to voluntarily give up their victim status.
Mm,
And and he recognizes, and this is why he has the rule, that if they don't do it in about a year, they're probably never going to do it. And
yeah.
he actually becomes cruel at that point. And have at it, man. Like there's upside to being a victim. There really is. You're not responsible.
Right.
You're off the hook. It happened to you. Um, but you're leaving a lot of life on the table in and the stakes are really high. So
Right.
the courageous ones who get in, I love hanging around with like active recovering addicts because those people are just courageous at a remarkable level. They don't feel it, but their humility opens up possibility in a way that is utterly uh, obvious and so full of hope that
That's right.
it's worthy of the effort.
I really like that frame, voluntarily giving up the victim moniker. That's really
Mm,
powerful.
mm,
And I think, yeah, you're right. When you're around people that have overcame hardships that you couldn't even imagine, it is really inspiring. They bring something out of you that calls you to go for more too. They're like a lighthouse that points the
mm,
way in the fog sometimes.
mm.
Is that something that you think is important with, like, for example, the work that you do, to be around other people, to do it in community? This is interesting work, right? Because it's something we have to do alone, but we do it
Yeah.
together. What's your take on that?
The work is 100% individual. That my comment to my friend Brady is an example of that. But it's not lost on me that I'm a active participant. This is I think my 28th quarter in a row of doing this work, and I was right alongside him, am right alongside him, and will be for the rest of my days. And that community element is the collective in contrast with the individual. They play
Mm,
really well together. But make no mistake, if everybody quit tomorrow and there is no men and women of discomfort, there'll still be a Dane of discomfort. Um,
mm,
and I think that resolve, that clarity, um, it's critical. And here's one of the reasons why. Not only is it encouraging to just have to do things in community, but there's also moments where community can really disappoint. There's moments where, like, gosh, come on, people. I thought we were after this together, and they
right,
disappoint
right,
us, and they don't, and those are actually remarkably important moments for me as an individual to go, am I only going to do this when there's a crowd, or am I going to show
right.
up when it's just me? And then when there is a crowd, there's this like extraordinary virtuous cycle that perpetuates itself. But the moment we start to think it's the collective that's doing it, it's over. It's
Mm,
still individuals who have to show up and decide. And we lean in. Sometimes it feels like people carry us, and that's great. And they can carry us for a minute, but not for good. Uh,
yeah.
it's our job to pick up the boats and carry ourselves,
Yeah, even when you don't feel like it, I think is something
especially.
that you've teased already. So, what do you do? How do you help people navigate those waters? Because it's all well and good. Right now, somebody's listening to this January 1st, right? They
Mm,
are excited, but we know that New Year's resolutions, what, 80% of them fizzle out by February. So we've got something like this motivated high energy, and then the shine wears off, the honeymoon period of I'm going to get
yeah.
better wears away, and now I'm left feeling like, I don't really feel like I want to do this. Like, how do you help people keep going when they don't feel like it?
One of the things that we've discovered, or named or framed, that has been very helpful for me and everyone in our community that has shared this back is, if you picture someone like the common idea of like going through stages of grief, right? Like someone you care about passes away, and first you're in denial, and then you're angry, and like you go through various predictable stages. Um, we had the thought experiment of, what if that was true around commitment? What if there were actually stages of commitment that were very predictable, that if we could name those, could help people get their bearings as they're
Mm,
navigating things? The reason I like this, and I love that you brought up New Year's resolutions, because not only is it timely, but um, that quit within 3 or 4 weeks thing, in some level, because that's kind of in the ether, that's given a lot of people an excuse to go, well, why even start? What's the point? I'm going to quit anyways.
right.
And I would argue that sense of excitement and urgency and thrill, that it's almost like dating someone, being smitten. I've been married 28 years, and I love my wife, but not in the same way that I did it like when I was dating her. It was a
Right.
different kind of experience, right? And but I don't poo poo that experience. That it was, if I wasn't drunk with love for my girlfriend, uh, I would never have gotten to 28 years. It was critical, but it's only a stage. And I think
Mm,
as people begin to see that there's a cyclical nature and stages. So the way that we talk about it in Ebwad is, we talk about, first there's a credo, is what we call it. But the first one is you commit to something. So when people put themselves on the hook for a big challenge in the new year or whatever, good for you. That's great. You've not done anything yet, but you have lit something. You
yeah.
went from 0 to 1, right? And you're interested in going to 100, but 0 to 1, really, that's a big move. So good for you if that's where you're at. The next stage, though, is actually more important, and it continues to grow in importance. But the second stage we call release, and this is our flag of surrender. This is our um, I don't, 3 weeks in, I have no interest in this thing. And that's when you go. And that
Mm.
contrast is so important. Earlier, I mentioned this discovery recently in neuroscience around the anterior midcingulate cortex, which is these substructures in the brain that only grow when you choose to do something that you don't want to do. It's
Yes.
the only time. So all of a sudden, if you are you're really into cold plunges, good for you. And you start, it goes from I hate them to I love them. It turns out that once you start loving them, the anterior
Yep.
midcingulate cortex no longer grows. You need something else that you don't want to do.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
surrender is something that perpetuates. It's not just a means to an end. It's actually an important part of the process. And when people anticipate that, they wake up in week 3, or they have a friend who reminds them in week 3 that, oh, you're right on time. You don't want to go to the
Right.
gym again? Perfect. Let's go. And they get through that stage because there's a third stage. And the third stage, again, CREDO, the E is embrace. You go from ticking the box, white knuckling it, I hate this, to hugging the cactus, to
Mm.
embracing the thing. So commit, release, embrace. And that little 3-part dance, you can do that over and over and over again in several areas of your life. So I think of like the reason we have D and O and credo is we commit, we release, we embrace. And once we find a little bit of success in one area of our lives, we now can begin to go, well, where else might I apply these ideas? So I think of like somebody who remodels their bathroom in their house. The first thing they discover once the bathroom is remodeled is how ugly their kitchen is. And they start realizing like, well, what if I took the same energy and time and resources and money that I put on my kitchen, I could apply to my bathroom, I could apply to my kitchen. And they start expanding. So that's how we think about, we commit, we release, we embrace the uncomfortable things, see growth. And then we go, well, where could we define that in other areas of our life?
Mm.
And then own it with this CRE process again. And
I
as we
love that.
perpetuate that idea, it builds a bit of a flywheel, and people start creating disproportionate momentum. And there's never an end to the gaps. And this is
Yeah.
why I don't think I'll ever be out of business. Is
Yeah.
we still get after it on a personal level, and
Right.
this is part of the human condition. So I have found that, especially there's a sense in which taking New Year's resolutions more seriously is the point, but it's not
Mm.
just I'm going to commit, I'm going to commit, I'm going to commit, I'm going to commit. It's I'm going to commit, I'm going to release, I'm going to embrace, and then I'm going to
Yes.
commit, I'm going to release and embrace, and that trifecta, you can really build momentum and traction in a way that uh, I when I start taking this frame and applying it to people, even I don't know, but extraordinary individuals who have done amazingly uncomfortable things. I think of Courtney Dauwalter, the endurance athlete, greatest maybe endurance runner of all time. If you listen to her uh, interviews, this language, it just shows up,
Yeah.
like it just
Yeah.
over and over again, and she's not alone. There's countless examples.
Dude, that's so good. I was thinking about that as you were talking. I think that you've put names, you've codified it, like you said, to a natural process that people that have been through this are going to be going like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And I
Mm.
think what that's really useful for the person that's on the onset of something big is actually managing expectations. It's
Yes,
huge.
yes,
Sometimes managing expectations is bigger than the result or anything else. It's like, just know what you're signing up for here. It's going to start, it's going to be amazing, it's going to peter off, and then it's going to cycle back around. And this too shall pass. It all does. And I think it's really healthy to have that frame, to know that, hey, it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows. You repeat this process enough, though, in a roundabout way, you fall in love with the suck
mm,
of it too. Like, you're like, okay, cool, I'm in the suck again. I love this now. I relish this because as I'm in the valley, I know I'm kind of gathering momentum, somewhat like a slingshot. It feels like it has to go backwards to harness the
mm.
energy to then propel forward. And I think
Yes.
being able to move through that and just understand that, yeah, again, it's not easy. It's not all sunshine, rainbows, and farting pixie dust. It's going to be going through the valley of despair sometimes, and it's going to
Mm.
feel sucky. And that's where probably you're getting the disproportionate amount of the gains. Just like in the gym, when you're getting crushed by the 225-pound lift, it's a lot different than the set of body weight 10, but you had to work up to get there. Can't go in
That's
on day
right.
one and throw that on your back, or you're going to be in trouble.
I'd love to just throw in to what you're saying that what another way to think of it is you're reading the signs more appropriately.
Mm,
So the Courtney Dauwalter example is really interesting. She'll talk about, like, she was an elite runner in college, and when she got into the endurance trail running scene, and for those who don't know, Courtney, she's there, probably one of her more famous races was she ran the, I don't know, I think it was the Cocodona 240 or some 240 50-mile race, and of all professional runners, and she beat all runners, male and female. The second
yeah.
place professional runner she beat by 11 hours. um,
Insane.
and and in the same
Insane.
year she won the trifecta of the three biggest 100-mile foot races in the world in the same season, like never been done before, setting records at two of them. She's just extraordinary. But when you
Wow.
ask her, how did she come in as kind of a middle of the pack runner at the beginning of her career, um, uh, as a professional, but now be so dominant, she really elegantly basically says, yeah, I just started rewiring what success looked like. So
Mm,
when my competitors were trying, she used to think a good race was, um, I show up at the race day, it's sunny out, wind's at my back, everything's working, I don't roll my ankle, and I have a great
yeah.
run. And then she shifted it to, how quickly can I get to what she calls a pain cave or hurt locker or the suck? How quickly can she get there? Because most of her competitors are trying to avoid that space, and she is actually running toward it faster than anyone else. And if she can get there, and she calls it remodeling the pain
Mm,
cave, then she expands what's possible. And now there are days where it doesn't go well, and the race has her more than she has it. That's okay. She's going to get up and run again tomorrow. And there's a sense in which, as she's become this all-time great, because she's just more willing to get to the, it's awful, I don't want to do it, I want to quit, and doing it anyways,
right.
all the way to hugging the cactus. And that's where she creates unfair advantages with her competitors.
Wow.
And then on an individual level, like for you and I, like mere mortals, we don't actually look like mere mortals to a lot of our peers. People
Yeah.
think that we're Courtney Dauwalters in our relatively speaking, and it's amazingly human and accessible to everybody. You don't need to be the greatest all time to do this. This is the kind of work that anybody who's willing to be voluntarily uncomfortable, what opens up is to others, you're weird, you're superhuman, it's like, no, I'm just a human being embracing the way the reality of the world is. And as
Yeah.
I do that with little things, you start stacking those up, and others look at you like crazy, but deep in your gut, like, I don't even want to take a cold shower again this morning.
Right.
Like, I have it on my docket literally to walk out of this interview and go straight into the cold shower and start my morning regimen, because I had another thing that started earlier this morning that interrupted my normal pattern. And guess what? I will, and I'm locked in on it, and
Yeah.
and I don't want to do it, but I know the kind of life it gives me, the days it gives me. It's worth every bit of uncomfortable. And the last thing I'll say on this part is, it's also shocking how short the discomfort actually is.
Mm,
Like, it doesn't what I think is going to kill me. I get into the metaphorical cold shower, and it's literally 6 to 18 seconds
right.
of discomfort. And then all of a sudden I breathe my way through it, get a hold of my body, I finish my shower, turn off the water. The air is warmer than the water was. I'm actually exhilarated,
Right.
I'm more comfortable than I would have been if I had taken the hot shower. Like, you're not actually giving up on comfort. That's the great irony. You're just
Yeah.
delaying the comfort to have the more satisfying kind, the more actual kind, not the false proxies. And that's giving up on fool's gold to have the real thing. Is That's when becomes an addiction in the best kind of way.
Yes. I forget which of the Stoics it was, but it's a very famous line. We suffer more in imagination than in reality.
Mm.
And that's that summed up right there. Like all of the stories about how bad it's going to hurt and how much it's going to suck. And then the reality of it is, okay, this is pretty intense. Oh, and it's done. And
And
oh,
it's done.
look at this. I feel friggin' amazing. And that's something I learned. The ice bath taught me this probably more than anything else was I had a story that I hated the ice bath. And therefore, when I understood this process that we're talking about, I realized, oh, so you know what you're going to do? You're going to get in an ice bath every day for 30 days because you hate it more than anything else. And what I realized was, I don't know, maybe a week into this, I was like, I was building it up to be something bigger than it was in my mind with the story of how much it's going to, and it's extra cold outside today and yada, yada, yada. But whenever I actually got into the tub and managed to just release, whether that was a little anchor, just like surrender to the experience, like have a breath, let it go, all of it just crumbled. And you can really see that so much of it is a mental game. So much of it is the fear that the mind conjures up. And this fear piece is a nice segue into something else I wanted to talk to you, which is the fear of failure and our relationship to failure in general. Because another one of the reasons that people don't play big, go for the win, is maybe because they fear that they will fail. But you started this conversation basically saying 40 years of failure put you here. And anybody that's accomplished anything great has obviously gone through a fair amount of failure. So what do you guide people on the relationship to failure and how they should use that potentially as a fuel towards their personal greatness?
Hmm. There's Seth Godin, who is a hero of mine and colleague and friend. At one point, I actually have it in front of me over here. I'm going to pull it out. 1 second. I know not
Yeah,
everyone will see this, but I want to explain it. There's this tomb of a book that I'm holding up right now. It's about 25 pounds, and it's
wow.
6 years of Seth's blog posts, illustrated, and it's just this amazing,
Yeah, incredible.
extraordinary work. But my favorite part about it is the cover. So the cover says, "This might work." And what's remarkable about it is if you turn the book around, the cover says, "This might not work."
There you
And
have it.
there you have it. Like, some things work and some things don't, but until they do or don't, you don't know. And that's the problem. Fear of failure is not a present state. It's a future state. Fear of success is not a present state. It's a future state. Fear that you'll repeat the past is a historic state. It's not a present state. There's a sense in which we are in a trance when we are living in that reality, this sense of fear. Now, I want to be careful here because there is, like, as often as this is well documented, this whole notion of like flight or fight or freeze, or our default responses to things, this animalistic part of us, that is very helpful when we actually are in danger. Biologically, we're wired to, it'll save our lives sometimes, but most of the time
Right.
that things are getting triggered, we're actually not. It's the story, like you described with the cold plunge. And that's where I want to invite people, when they think about fear, to just pause and ask yourself, what tense are you in? Are you in the present tense, the future tense, or the past tense? If you're lost in the past, like you're daydreaming about fear or nostalgia or something in the history, you don't want this to happen. I invite you to interrupt and get back here again. Or if my friend Paul Young likes to describe future tripping, living as though the future is now,
Yeah.
when it's a fiction, it's not real. Also not resourceful. So I think there's a reason why there's, in positive psychology with mindfulness, or if you're in the ice bath, there's nothing else going on. You are in a present state. You're not thinking
Right.
about groceries or a to-do list, or you are right there. Or, breath work. It brings us to the now in such a way. I think this whole notion of, like, this old line of, be here now. It's the one thing
Yeah.
to say it as an axiom. To have our body participate with that through these voluntary discomforts is really largely the work. So when I think about people who are terrified of it, it might not work, or terrified of what if it does work, neither they're both just stories and fictions. And whatever you can do to have your body participate with the idea that here is the only place that is. And I get how woo-woo that can sound, and I kind of hate how woo-woo it sounds, yet
Right.
it does reflect reality.
That's
Right
right.
now, I am here on this call with you. There's nothing else that is true for me, subjectively. So my best contribution would be to hold in to this spot And that's true in a pressurized situation with a client, or with a breakdown in relationship with my spouse or kid, or an argument with a neighbor or retail worker or someone on the freeway. Like, slow down, get
Yes.
here. And the more I'm present, I tend to make far more. I know my position. It's a little more humbling. I tend to assume less about the other. Um,
Yes.
I'm more willing to absorb some of the hard things that are coming, and probably countless other ways to describe the moment. But the exercise when we're struggling with fear is to be present to what is now. And the
Mm,
more that, at least for me, the more that I've done that, the more I've found, like, I just get back to the work. I get back to the climb. I attend less to getting to the plateau and getting disappointed, or getting to the plateau and being overwhelmed, or
right.
it's like, no, it's why phrases like, cut wood, carry water,
That's right.
are so profound. It just gets us back to it.
Yeah. I'm thinking of an acronym that I've used a lot in fear. Having the same acknowledgements that some fear is very real and inbuilt survival mechanism and all of that stuff. But for the most part, much of fear is how I've liked to reflect this back to people: false evidence appearing real.
Mm,
A story, false
mm,
evidence appearing real. Now, if you can maybe use that in the moment you feel fear and say, yeah, like, I love your frame. What tense are you in right now? Is this the history repeating itself? Is it anxiety over a moment that still hasn't come? And of course, it puts you back in the now. And really, the only place where in the now fear exists is when there's actual real fear and danger. Like,
mm,
yes, there's an attacker in your room. You're going to be very present and in fear. But
mm,
99% of the time, you're going to see that it's a mental manifestation of something that is not right here, right now. And
mm.
then you are back in this very Ramdassian sense, be here now, which I
Yeah,
get can sound woo woo, but is a universal truth. And it's what
that's
our
right.
great sages and teachers have talked about forever, since antiquity. And it's very interesting to me that even, working in self development or productivity, or however you want to phrase it, ends up coming back to these universal truths like,
Mm,
try and become a little Buddha, try and become a little a person that can have whatever anchor it is to get them back to the now, because nothing is made worse by being present.
mm,
Absolutely nothing.
mm,
And I would argue that almost everything is made better. The good moments are enhanced by being here and now, and the bad moments are not as bad when you are truly present with what is. Do
mhm.
you personally have anchors, or is it something you've practiced for so long now that you just find yourself, you notice a rumination, or you can pull back? Do you breathe? Do you have a word? Do you have a strategy of any kind?
I have about 50, and they're on rinse and repeat. It's
Yeah.
amazing how forgetful I become.
Yeah.
How and this is, it's interesting the way that humans are wired to live in 24-hour cycles. But
Mm,
I kind of need to start my day in certain ways to wake up to things throughout my day. I have several axioms, anchors, that you're describing, ways to shift my perspective. Um, and then even how I end my days, how I put my day to rest, and um, appeal to a God that I believe is going to sustain me and resurrect me in the next morning, and get after it
yes.
again. And so all those things are profound to me. But I would say, the ways to get me back to center, in our community, we have 8 specific ones. We talk about, and I won't get into all of them here, but get to instead of have to. And these are
Yes.
all little pithy, nothing lines that some people have heard, some people haven't, but they just get us back to perspective. So
Hmm.
get to, choose your role: victim, hero, guide, rescuer. Choose. You get to be whatever you want to be in that regard. Uh,
Yeah.
fuel first, travel light, prioritize profit, what's profitable, um, correct course, because we're always off course. That's a Bo
Yeah.
Eason line. The um, Play Infinite, James Carson, Simon Sinek, both commenting on that in book form, but it just very quickly reminds us of the bigger game we could play.
Yes.
Stand Now is one that kind of captures all these ideas, like, hey, there's an opportunity to stand and to do it
Mm,
presently. Um, and we have other things that we just vernacular, like things that have made its way into our lexicon as a community, that we're just kind of reminding ourselves with language that we can all grab hold of. that are well worn. And it's interesting how in some seasons, like Get To is super profound, and in other seasons, Travel Light is really
Right.
profound. Um,
Yeah.
and there's all of our days require often unique kind of means or tactics. Um, but the strategy, the themes are very consistent in all of the
Yes.
days.
It's so spot on. Was chuckling to myself a little bit when you said how tragically comedic it is how quick we forget. I find myself sometimes thinking I've got it all figured out, and then 3 minutes later I'm back into sleepwalking state, and I'm Anthony DeMelloing myself awake again with all different kinds of manners of things, exactly like you just said, and some of the same pithy aphorisms that just they land for whatever reason. And anything that you have, because you're going to forget dozens of times a day, to have more tools on the tool belt so you can pick the right one for the job is probably really useful. So, um, you know, getting a little actionable and tangible as we start to bring this one home to land. Somebody's listening to this, they are now thinking, all right, 2025, it's going to be a big year. I'm going to choose the discomfort. I'm going to go for my win. I'm going to do something big. I'm going to break the habit of being myself, to use a Joe Dispenza line. I'm going to become the person that I know I can be if I do these things. Um, how do you help people that feel somewhat overwhelmed by that big process to
Mhm.
ground it into small, daily, tangible tasks that can just help them stay the course? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm so hopeful that there are more and more practitioners of this way that are emerging. The challenge with that is it can feel like paying attention to all those ideas and people who are living these things out, these practitioners, and the books they're writing, and and I'm one of these people. Like,
Yeah.
it can get overwhelming, and I really appreciate that question, because none of the only the the measure of whether any of the stuff is worth it is its efficacy, and
Mm,
it needs to find a way forward. Again, I love it when we can first, I guess, acknowledge the cognitive load problem when we're just considering all of the options. Optionality isn't our friend when it comes to this work, and bringing things down to one simple thing. This whole thing for me started with flossing my teeth.
yeah.
That was my
Mhm,
whole practice, was
yeah.
figuring out, oh, I could, if I floss my teeth before I went pee in the morning, I'd have a thing that I don't want to do that I know is good for me. Like, you can't go too small,
Right.
uh, as long as it's something. Because if you can build off the small, it's just a time horizon inevitability that you're going to take ground in ways. But I even want to go back to your phrase at the start of this question, like, this is going to be a big year. Well, it's going to be a year. That's what we know. It's going to be a year, and hopefully you'll be around in it. There's if we can kind of um, unload the expectations of this needs to be
Right.
the year, that can be
Right.
resourceful for some people.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
for other people, they've had a bunch of those kind of years in a row where things are not turning out the way they would prefer. And maybe it does require a little bit more excitement and energy, but just recognize that's probably in the commit phase.
Mm,
There's going to be moments where you're going to be like, this is the worst year ever. Like, I remember 2020, everyone thought 2020, we're going to see the
mhm.
world in 2020. It's so incredible. We ended up seeing it in 2020, ironically, but not the way people thought. And
Right.
as a result, there was two groups of people that came out of COVID. There were the people who had horrific experiences and it crushed them, and the countless amount of people I've talked to who, with great kind of empathy for those who suffered, will say that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because this extrinsic force woke me up.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, practically speaking, to get to your question, if you don't put yourself on the hook for something and it's an immovable object, it it won't it won't deliver. So my bias is pick a minimal viable set of habits, and, like, I'm talking like 1 to 3, like, not huge,
Mm,
but just your attitude is, this is not where you're going to end. This is where you're going to begin. And you start like building a fire, like you get a little kindling and you protect it and you just feed it just gently, like it takes moments. It feels, you'll look back in retrospect and go, I can't believe that if I just stuck with it past 3 weeks to 3 months and past 3 months to 3 years, you're going to blink and it'll be past 3 years to 3 decades. Like it's amazing. But it comes down to 24-hour chunks. Who are you committed to
Yeah.
be today? And how can you steward this little thing? And I find if people can be a little less, I want them to be ambitious, but the means to
Yeah.
that ambition is far more, as Seth says, drip, 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 brick by brick.
Oh, I like that.
It's just a little, and you stick with it.
Yeah, little by little, a little becomes a lot. That's
Mm.
an old saying in English. People say it all the time,
Mm.
and it's so true. And I appreciate that sometimes as well because it feels more approachable. And I think what you're really helping people prioritize there is success
Mm.
and momentum. You
Yes.
mentioned momentum a few times previously, and momentum is everything in this game. Whereas if you decide that you are going to change every aspect of your life starting tomorrow,
Mm.
and then you get 2 days in, and then that big heavy rock of momentum is falling on you because you bit off more than you could chew,
Mm.
then there's a chance that you never get back in the race again. Because you
That's
might
right.
just be like, right, well, failure is who I am, and I'm not doing this anymore. But if you
Mm.
start so small, like just with flossing your teeth,
Mm.
and then you do that and you're like, hey, you know what? Feel pretty good about that. Maybe I'm going to start doing 10,000 steps a day or 10
Mm-hmm.
push-ups after I brush my teeth and floss, and
Mm-hmm.
just watch it build and build and build and pick up the next little breadcrumb. I think is the thing. Listen to that voice inside. Choose to wake up in a world that wants you asleep, which is easier said than done, but there's little clues along the way. And I think it's the job of conversations like this and things like you offer with MWAD that are just trying to not say this is the only way to get here, but
That's
like,
right.
hey, again, we're a lighthouse in the fog. There are examples, there are people here, and we know deep down that you want more. And we're hopefully going to try and foster an environment that you can do that.
Mm.
So I'm gonna kind of throw it back on you, even though I know we're gonna say things like, everybody's different, everybody has different tools and all of that stuff. But let's say if you could design an ultimate self-development tool belt for 2025 and you had some essentials in it for you or for a past version of you or for somebody that might be listening that just needs a little bit of inspiration, what might it include? Maybe it's a really impactful book that you read, or maybe it's a particular practice that above all else for you was incredible. Any kind of tool or technique that you have that you would have on that belt of impact.
Gosh, I really want to answer the question directly because I'm looking around me and I'm a flood with the very things you're describing, and
Yep.
and they all work. They're all resourceful,
Yeah.
and yet what I prefer to say is less inspiration, more perspiration.
Mm,
Let's. It's not a cognitive act. I think this podcast episode is sufficient. You don't need
mm,
any more inputs. What you
so
need is
true.
to put yourself on the hook for something, anything, and don't do it alone. And there's a sense in which you're going to be doing it alone anyways, but doing it alone with somebody next to you is profound. And
Mm.
I think that if folks could hear this and go, my next step isn't to go read more about it, but to put myself in the midst of it, I think they'll be happier with the result.
So good. Yeah, so good. The magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding.
Mm.
And the work you're not doing is not in more books or podcasts. They're great. And if you enjoy them, you want to listen to them on your commute, albeit do it.
Well, they
But
sustain us, right?
do the thing.
They're
Yeah.
better. They're better when we're in motion. Now they're helpful.
Yes.
But if you're
Yes.
not in motion, don't read another book about it. Get on the bike.
No.
Get on the bike.
Mental masturbation. If it's just
So
it's just
painful.
shelf help. It's not self help,
The years I've logged.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Well, Dane, this has been really fun. I love this kind of conversation and this topic in general. And I think you've got some really awesome insights that I know people are leaving this conversation feeling pretty jazzed up about, to start small, to then make it something big. So where can people go to look into MWAT if they're curious about what you do or where to follow and keep up with your stuff?
You know, our cheeky little tagline at MWAD is "It's probably not for you." Literally, if you go to it's probably not for you.com, you'll find MWAD.
I love that.
But I say that to say, for a lot of people, I would encourage people to go to mwod.io/apply, MWOD, men, women of discomfort /in or out, IO/apply, because the app, even if you don't sign up for the community, I think going through the process of answering the questions in the application, if that's all you do, that alone could be the right next minimal viable practice to go do. That could be it. Like, get in where you're not just hearing and thinking, it's like you're responding and discovering what you actually think about things, what's actually going on for you. What does your future self wish you would do right now? And that's largely what the questions will ask. I'd recommend that as for folks who are like, I kind of want to barf at the idea of doing MWOD. If that's you, that you're in a great spot. But people who come in like flexing, going up, this is for me, I got this, almost all of them fail. It's amazing. It's the ones that just kind of want to be sick about it, and they go in begrudgingly, like, oh, they're for us. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's one crew. The last thing I'll say is some people are just like, I do need to talk it out. There's some particulars to my reality. And I actually have an asynchronous communication device created called AskDane.com. And it's not because I'm special, but I am on the other line. And it's I can give it out because only the courageous choose to get on there. But I would say if anyone who's interested and wants to talk a little further, I'd go to AskDane.com, click the little pink button, and with video recording, just check in. Tell me your story. What are you up against? What are you wrestling with as a next step? And we'll just start a conversation. If you want clarity around how could MWOD relate to you, like around maybe you have particular health issues or eating regimen that are required, or a conscience issue that you want to talk through, like all those things are fair game to get clear on, and we can make accommodations for. But the point is simply take like action. Thinking about taking action and taking action are distinct. So going to a website, filling out an application, going to Ask Dane and sharing where you're at and what you're wanting, and what might the next step be. Those are action-oriented things. And I think they are indeed traction in real time. And that's my one request is if we never interact again, the best thing you could do as a response to this, if you have any sense of movement in your guts about this, is to not leave it in your guts, get it into your body and take action.
Yeah, I love it. Naval says inspiration is perishable. So don't think, wow, I'm so jazzed up about this, I'll do it after work today. No, do it now. Pull over on the side of the road if you need to. Like, do it.
That's right.
Do the thing, because doing is faster than thinking about doing. And after you go to AskDane.com or you check out MWOD, share this podcast with someone who you hope has a radical 2025 as well. We love you. Thanks for being here. Stay radical. Dane Sanders, ladies and gentlemen. Dane, thank you. I am excited to see what you get up to in 25 as well, my friend.
Thank you, Steve.
Peace out. Hey, before you go anywhere, listen up. I've got a special announcement. Mark your calendars for this one. November 22nd, Heart and Soil is dropping a new documentary called Fed a Lie. This is going to be the documentary on seed oils. The end, the nail in the coffin. Expect to hear from experts like Dr. Paul Saladino, Nina Teicholz, Dr. Chris Kenobi, even superstars like Bethany Hamilton, as we gathered the big dogs to put an end to the seed oil madness. If you want to check that out, go to Heart and Soil's YouTube, subscribe, and go to fedalie.film. Plug in your details, and we will make sure you get the link as soon as that goes live so you can spread it far and wide. This will be an incredible conversation starter at the family table over the holidays, and it will be you helping us to spread this message of radical health and be a part of the healthy revolution. And as always, thank you for being here. If you like the show, please like it, subscribe it, and share it. Help us to spread this message of radical health. And we'll see you next week. Big love.